This podcast is sponsored by Monarch Money. Are you saving to reach your financial goals? Reaching those goals isn't just about getting more money, but by managing what you have. And the best way to manage your money? Monarch Money. Monarch Money is a new kind of finance app that's intuitive, powerful, ad-free, and takes the headaches out of budgeting. Try it free when you go to monarchmoney.com/podcast. Monarch puts all your accounts, investments, transactions, and finances at your fingertips. With a complete view of your finances, you'll gain insights on your spending and find new ways to save. Plus, Monarch lets you customize your dashboard, collaborate with your partner, set custom budgets and goals, and track your progress toward them. See why Mint users are turning to Monarch Money and loving it, and why the Wall Street Journal named Monarch Money the best budgeting app overall. Get a 30-day free trial when you go to monarchmoney.com/podcast. That's MONARCH money.com/podcast for your free trial. monarchmoney.com/podcast.
Welcome to another edition of Chargers Unleashed. Jake Hefner and Dan Wolkenstein here with you from the LAFB Network. If this is your first time tuning into the show, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Dan Wolkenstein, the Los Angeles Chargers are currently in the middle of their Phase 2 off-season workouts. As we had said during the show yesterday, the veterans have come and joined the rookies in the early portions of these workouts of this season. And there were a number of different takeaways, namely from newly acquired cornerback Christian Fulton, newly acquired wide receiver DJ Chark, a couple of the positions coaches, Chris Leary and Steve Clinkscale. And there was a lot to take away from this. A lot of quotes that popped out that should really get the juices flowing from the Chargers, not just from player perspective, from definitely the coaching perspective. And Dan and I wanted to go through all of that as it stands to kind of set the expectations of what we can expect from this Chargers team, from this coaching staff, and especially as much as we've been talking about competition battles for these next few months, there's a lot that's going to have to come in from that. So Dan Wolkenstein, obviously, before we start, sir, how are you?
I'm great, man. Honestly, listening and watching these press conferences and hearing these players and coaches kind of talk about what makes them tick and the things that they look for and what they're excited about and just the overall Phase 2 approach to coaching and playing and the new lease on life that we start hearing about from these players and coaches, it's got me fired up. So lots to talk about. And you and I, we talked about this. So much turnover and so much change. There's so many variables of what this team could possibly look like. And we got a pretty good sense of that from a coaching perspective in those press conferences. So from Clinkscale, O'Leary, you mentioned it, from Christian Fulton and DJ Chark. And there are reasons and there are similarities as to why a lot of these players and coaches have come to this Los Angeles Chargers team. And some of the key themes that you hear from a lot of these guys that we've heard: Justin Herbert is a big reason why people come here, and Jim Harbaugh is a big reason why people come here. The rest falls in line, but as we go through this today, we'll discuss a bunch of the kind of key takeaways because there were some fun ones and some scorched earth comments that we heard from someone who is no longer with the Tennessee Titans. Lots to discuss, but Jake, second foremost, how are you?
I'm doing good. It's we're just wanting football back. We're right at the cusp of the 2024 NFL schedule release, which I know a lot of people are excited about, so we can actually go through and break down week by week what each one of the opponents for the Chargers are going to look like. But this is the time of year where it's just like, it's nice to see them getting back into organized activity. You're just waiting for just that first day of real training camp when the pads come on, that you could say, okay, I've the itch is back. Like, it needs to be August already. Preseason needs to be back already. And this is what you get when you go from the highs of the NFL draft to these, May, June, July months that you have to get through in order to actually see some contact in football.
Yeah, so let's talk about the contact in football. But before we do that, Jake, let's talk about our friends and pay some bills.
Yes, want to remind everybody that BetOnline is your number one source for all of your summer sports this season, from MLB, golf, NBA, and NHL playoff stats. All of the latest stats, news, and scores available to follow for all of your favorite teams. Get the latest odds and lines, including the latest team matchups, player props, and odds on just about every sport that's out there. Head on over to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to get into the action. Once again, that's BetOnline. Use the promo code UNLEASHED, and BetOnline is always where the game starts.
So, lots to discuss here. So let's kind of get right into it. We heard from both of the DB coaches, which foresight here, they're DB coaches. They all do the same thing in the same rooms. They coach together. They coach different positions all together so everyone understands what they do. O'Leary and Clinkscale speak. Jake, which would you like to start with first?
I'd rather finish with Clinkscale because I felt like, and again, not taking anything away from some of Chris O'Leary's comments, but I really gravitated towards what Steve Clinkscale was saying in terms of this secondary, which has a lot of new bodies in it, and what his plans are. But I'd like to start with Chris O'Leary just in general, in terms of, I think that some of us forgot when Cam Hart was drafted that this was a former coach in Chris O'Leary of Cam Hart at Notre Dame. This is also a guy who I thought was very interesting connection, considering if you go back and you look at Cam Hart's history, because he was a wide receiver going through high school and then converted to safety at Notre Dame. And sure enough, future NFL star Xavier Watts was doing that very same thing in Notre Dame, was jumping back and forth between wide receiver and DB, and then goes off to be one of the highest interception players in the league last year for Notre Dame, thanks to a one, Chris O'Leary. But I think the overall philosophy that has come out from both of these guys in general is that you're going to want to see guys that are going to be versatile in the secondary, both from safety and corner alike. They're not limiting anybody on any capabilities. And one of the biggest things that was brought up, obviously, throughout all of this was the talk of injuries. And the Chargers are no strangers to that. So if you can have certain DBs be versatile enough to ultimately come in and be able to, maybe not to, the 1-to-1 ratio of what the person was before you, but if you can at least make that impact not be such a significant drop when someone goes out, there was a lot of good takeaways from this. So I love the philosophy in which they're coming at this with, in order to make their DBs versatile, and especially for the Chargers' consideration with so many new faces in that DB room. If we thought the competition was going to be fierce before this, I'm really interested to see how this is going to go down, because not every DB can be versatile and succeed in those type of situations. So that competition in that room is just going to be ratcheted to 11.
Yeah, Chris Leary, the story is kind of interesting and fun. He talks about Jesse Minter being his mentor and kind of mentoring him along the way, and that's how he ended up getting here. He had not talked to Jim Harbaugh at all prior to getting the job, or to interviewing, I believe. And he talked about his familiarity, obviously, with the one Alohi Gilman, coached with him back at Notre Dame. Talked about his excitement and the energy that is exuded by a one Derwin James. Talk about the intensity of how he gets right up to you and he wants to hear everything you're talking about and wants to kind of learn it all, soak it all in. He's bought in 100%. And, it's clear that Derwin James is a big reason why both of these coaches are coaching here and why they are both so excited to coach here, because Derwin James is an alpha, and we'll get to Clinkscale in a second, but he talked about that. And for Chris O'Leary to have two safeties, one of which he is very familiar with and saw him being a productive NFL player from his time at Notre Dame, and then having a former All-Pro in one Derwin James, who may have done a little too much last couple of years, is able to scale that back a bit. Not only is he having the safety group doing their thing, but to have the safety and cornerback group all doing the same drills in the same meeting rooms, doing the same positional training together to understand not just their role, but every other role. So that way, during game time, during real reps with bullets flying, they can trust where their teammates are, because they know where they're supposed to be, because they played that earlier in practice or in earlier reps in the game. So you're right. O'Leary and Clinkscale both, I think, give Chargers fans and myself some hope, right? Because I think we both acknowledge, and Chargers fans can remember, the DB room, aside from Alohi Gilman, and that's even including Derwin James last year, really wasn't great. And that's probably being kind. Like Derwin James, I think, was asked to do way more things. He seemed to be a bit strung out and was kind of thrashing a bit, not necessarily to his fault. And then the quarterback room was an absolute train wreck all season, which has been widely noted. Seeing Jesse Minter, who the scheme predicates itself on a lot on the shoulders of the DBs, safeties and corners, that's a good thing. And you have continuation from that same scheme in college to the pros, from Clinkscale, Junior Colston, a bunch of folks here from Michigan to LA in the new DB room. And we talked about that. You talked about the competition, Jake. We'll get to Clinkscale now. Whew. Clinkscale had some fun sound bites. And
yes.
First, before we get to the stuff on the field, off the field, he seems like such a genuine man. Talked about like how he would follow Jim Harbaugh everywhere, how important like that family dynamic and family faith football thing resonates with him, and talked about his kind of relationship with Jim Harbaugh, with them having multiple kids and kind of starting there. He's a big fisher, and a lot of the personal stuff kind of comes out from that conversation with Clinkscale. But then as he starts going on about the DB room and kind of what they emphasize and what their goals are and how they go ahead and execute things, that's what got me fired up, Jake. That's what got me fired up.
Yep. Yeah, the aspect when he was the first question that he was asked that really got these quotes going was in regards to Christian Fulton, when he was basically asked, do you see Christian as an outside or an inside guy? And to which he responded, I see him as both. And then he went off on this statement to basically talk about what he wants from his DBs. He's like, I want them to play both nickel and outside. And specifically, again, referencing the injury factor. He's like, because somebody's going to go down. And what is it you're going to need? You can't just have a finite group of nickel cornerbacks in there. I mean, technically, from a numbers and roster perspective, you can. But if you're in a pinch where the worst should happen, you want your outside guys to be versatile enough to come in and know the system and know what to do, so you're not handcuffing your team in the back end of the field defensively. So I really liked what he went on from that. And then, of course, he ended with the same type of question with Asante Samuel Jr. in terms of his versatility. Now, we already kind of knew this about Asante Samuel Jr. before he came into the league, that he could play the nickel, he could play outside. You're taking now really the veteran of this quarterback room,
which is wild.
Which it's still wild to say, yes. And Dan, we've talked about this a lot as well. We thought that there was conversations last year, 2 years ago, as far as to say, is Asante Samuel Jr. cornerback 3 back in the days of Michael Davis and J.C. Jackson when he was first acquired? And now essentially he has the CB1 label on his back because he's the veteran of this room. He knows it better than anybody that's been in that room as of right now. And now I'm really interested to see how Clinkscale is going to deploy this, especially with Tarheeb Still and Jasir Taylor, because we know what Tarheeb Still was drafted for. He was drafted to play a nickel, and he could play a nickel. And obviously from what Jasir Taylor's NFL experience has been thus far, has been mostly in that nickel spot. So that camp battle alone is going to be fierce. But then you start thinking about the Cam Harts, the Dean Leonards, the Christian Fultons, obviously. How is this all going to round out? And as I said on my tweet yesterday, the Chargers have kept 10 DBs on their roster the last 2 years. Last year, they kept 5 corners and 5 safeties. The year before that, they kept 6 corners and 4 safeties, I see this being more of a mirror to 2022 in terms of projecting 53-man roster spots. And I say that just from the standpoint because you have so many new faces in this room. And I would still expect, as Dan and I have both talked about, between now and September, that they're going to look to add to this room between now and then. So the competition at DB, Dan, especially when your cornerback coach is saying, I want you all to know how to play both spots, that's really going to ramp things up.
Yeah, Yeah, and Clinkscale, he talked about Coach Minter's teachings and kind of what he does best and how he helps kind of players by stacking things on top of each other and learning things week over week, and you build on top of up on top of things. And Clinkscale talked about his not forcing players to do things that they're not good at, which I think is a very key differentiator because we've seen people in years past be put in positions that they should not be put in. We don't have to rehash all of that, but simply put, that is new.
That's what happened.
And so to not force fit a square peg in a round hole and allow players to do what they excel at, allow others to do what they may not be good at. That's a difference. That's a difference. And it's the thing that I like about this is Jesse Minter, defensive coordinator, Clinkscale O'Leary. We talked about Jesse Minter kind of predicates, and there's a lot of pressure and there's a lot on the shoulders of the secondary room. These are the guys that are shouldering that, right? And so having a defensive coach and a defensive coaching staff that is putting all of their eggs in a position group that has been so bad is big, because reality, I'm not worried about the front seven. I'm really not. Like, I think the front four, definitely defensive line is going to be just fine. I'm very bullish on the linebacking core. I have so many questions about the cornerback room. I'm not saying they're going to be bad. I just have a lot of questions, and we don't know. There's a lot of variables there. But having these guys at the helm to help coach that group up is important to me. He talked about, you mentioned Christian Fulton. He kind of talked about the rookie mentality that he brings in. He kind of lit up when he was asked about Christian Fulton and talked about him having this kind of new lease on life and just wants to learn everything and to soak it all in. Talked about his fluidity and athleticism. And then when he was talking about Derwin James, boy, did he light up. He talked about his approach, Derwin's enthusiasm and his fire. And even in the film room, they have Derwin in the front row asking question after question after question to make sure not only he understands what's going on, but the rest of his teammates understands. And so the fact that all the DBs, corners and safeties, are all in the coaching room together, all the coaching staff is in the room together, outside and nickel. Clinkscale talked about this, which I thought was interesting, Jake. The importance of understanding the outside cornerback room and the outside cornerback position first before going to nickel. Because they need to have the boundary corners. Like, he talked about the importance and how much is predicated on the boundary corner. And so, to your point, it seems like they've got a good amount of nickel cornerbacks that they can deploy. And he also discussed how maybe some, for example, when he was talking about Asante Samuel Jr., some may be deployed on a down-by-down basis. He was saying how first down is different than third down nickel, which we can extrapolate that out later because that is an interesting discussion on its own right. But silos, right? You need to be good at one thing, stack, good at this, cool, move on to the next thing. If you're not good at this, stay here. That's a big thing. Like, let these players stack their abilities and over time get better versus having them do all of these things at once and then none of them turn out to be great.
It's an echo from what Jesse Minter said that he was going to do with his defense from literally day one. He was never going to put a player in a position to where they could not handle it, to put too much on their plate, to say, we need you in this position. We need you to adapt to it. No.
Which is such a breath of fresh air, man.
The coaching is going to mold and improve and perfect what the player is good at and pull all those best traits out of it. As you were talking about with Clinkscale talking about the stacking, progressing. Obviously, everybody coming in, there's been so much turnover in this roster, and with this secondary unit in particular, we can't all expect these guys to hit the ground running. And there will be flaws that they will have to go over throughout this rookie season, and some will get it better than others. But in terms of, again, I'm so glad that you brought up the standpoint of what we have seen specifically in this DB room and what the expectations were for certain people that used to be here that unfortunately was just a complete and utter disaster.
Mm-hmm.
Now you go from that perspective to now what Minter and Clinkscale are talking about. And you think with a very now young and new and fresh cornerback room. And this is how you're going to develop. This is how you develop.
And it's interesting because it sounds like you're doing what's best for the player.
That's right.
Not what's best for the scheme.
Yes.
And that flip is so apparent. Like when you hear it, like, oh my goodness, like obviously, but until you hear it, you don't realize it.
Yeah. I was just going to say, it's the same approach that you could take with veterans. You could take a veteran who knows everything about the game at any position.
Totally.
But if you mold it to where you could say, I'm not going to put you in a position to where you're going to fail. I'm going to put you in a position where you're going to succeed, and you're going to succeed at your highest. That's how you build confidence. That's how you build a better player overall. And in doing that, that's going to better one side of the ball or the other, depending on where you play. So I love the message that is being sent out right now. It's fantastic.
And to wrap that in a bow, that's why Christian Fulton is a Los Angeles Charger, which we'll get to here in a second. But he talked about the methodology and what they preach and the way that they coach and the style of defense. That's why he's here, and the opportunity to kind of reinvent himself. He feels he's still an ascending player. But the last thing on Clinkscale, which you saw this a bit with Minter, again, to reiterate the key themes, he talked about, opposing teams will go ahead and they will create new, schemes, or they'll have different plays, or their coaching staff will create these new plays for these new players as they're installing. But underneath the underlying fundamentals, 4 pillars: communication, destroying blocks, disrupting the ball, finishing and making good tackles. I think there were maybe 5 because there's also good effort in there as well. But whatever they are doing, whatever scheme, whatever crazy stuff they are doing, those underlying pillars should shine through. And if the underlying pillars are not being executed, it sounds like, because Clinkscale said, like, hey, we're gonna hold them accountable now. If those things aren't being done, they're not gonna be playing. So really, really insightful and energetic and real, right? I think that's what I'm seeing with a lot of these coaching staff and the players. And Jim Harbaugh allows and enables, and the coaching staff talked about this, enables and desires everyone to just be themselves. He's not trying to change anybody. Do what they do best. Be who you are. And so to see some of just like the personalities shine through has been fun. A couple players talked as well, Jake. New wide receiver, DJ Chark. New cornerback, Christian Fulton. What'd you make of those?
Yeah, with DJ Chark, it was, first of all, whoever had DJ Chark as being the veteran of this wide receiver group coming in on their bingo card, congratulations, you're the winner. But with DJ Chark, there was a lot of familiarity and opportunity, is what he alluded to in terms of coming to LA. He mentioned obviously the opportunity to play with Justin Herbert, the familiarity with his former wide receivers coach Sanjay Law, and just him in general, just talking about, this was his actual quote. Going into year 7, I felt that this was a great place for me. I'll talk to anyone who wants to pick my brain, but at the end of the day, I'm still learning myself. I'd like to come in, instead of looking at it as a role, as a mentor, I look at it as a brother to these guys, talking about the wide receivers. And now you're talking about, this is now a player who has come into a wide receiver room that has seen so much turnover in one off season, and is now loaded in the last month. I think, depending on what side of the ball you were on when you got the news that MVS had signed with the Bills this morning, you could either consider that a good thing, you could consider that a bad thing, depending on what side of the coin you are. Yes, because there is so many wide receivers all of a sudden for the Los Angeles Chargers that are coming in to compete for roster spots. And I think there's, what is it, Dan? I think they're at 11 or 12. I can't remember the exact number now, but
too many, whatever it is,
it's too many. And you can't keep less than 6. So from DJ Chark's perspective, yeah, it's a great opportunity for him. It's a great opportunity to have some familiarity with his coaching staff, because in terms of what they want to run, and you mirror that with some of the other wide receivers that they have also obviously brought in, specifically in the draft, it tells you a little bit of where this offense is going. gives you a little bit of those indicators. So, I thought everything that DJ had said in terms of coming in here and looking for a fresh start and a fresh opportunity, you know, we'll see how quickly everything comes along for him. He's essentially, just because of veteran status, set in as I won't necessarily give him the title of wide receiver one, but he is the seasoned vet out of this group. And there's going to be a lot of people. So depending on system and opportunities, maybe the run game is going to be the best friend for DJ Chark down the line. Because
it might be.
When you need something vertical, Justin Herbert can definitely place the ball where it needs to be.
Yes, and DJ Chark talked about that being one of the reasons why he came, was playing with an elite quarterback and playing with someone who was a top 5 quarterback in any given Sunday. And his ability to stretch the ball downfield and Justin's ability to make receivers around him better. Like, that's a big reason why DJ Chark is here. And DJ Chark's, one of his best abilities is getting downfield and contested catches and his speed. Justin Herbert arguably is the best quarterback to provide for someone like that. And DJ Chark has not had a quarterback like Justin Herbert before. And so DJ Chark seems to be excited. Talked about him being sure he's a veteran, but he's not just trying to teach everybody else things. He's trying to learn just as much as he's trying to teach. He wants to learn from these younger guys as well. So it's an exciting thought of what this receiving core is going to look like and who's going to provide what and how this offensive scheme is going to be deployed, because we still have no clue, which is kind of fun, but we can guess. And I like the DJ Chark signing. I think that was a really smart move that provided this Chargers team with something that they were desperately without once Mike Williams walked out that door. And so I think DJ Chark understands the task at hand and why he's here and his role on this team. And hopefully he can stay healthy, because if he can stay healthy, he can have kind of a transcendent and ascending year and get this guy paid. And we talk comp picks, which we know that whole formula thing. Think of the number of free agents that were brought in on 1 or 2 year deals that if they ball out and they stay, wonderful. If they ball out and leave, wonderful. It's a win-win. Then Christian Fulton, Jake, comes on. And you could tell, and you heard rumblings, I heard rumblings of him just kind of needing a fresh start from his time in Tennessee. And you could extrapolate what that could possibly mean. And, maybe he left nothing for you to have to wonder anymore, because he flat out told you. What do you think of the Christian Fulton discussion?
I thought there was a combination of things that he needed to get off his chest, the chip that he's on his shoulder that he's coming into camp with, the things that he needs to prove to himself. This sounded like something that he wanted to say for a while. Like, he's been waiting to get in front of a microphone with some of the things that he said. And in short, without, specifying anything, he basically just said that Tennessee just was not the right fit for him, which is things that we have talked about on this show, things that were alluded to at the time of his signing in free agency. And when you piece that all together, he also said that he wasn't happy with the way that free agency ended up panning out for him in his current situation. But all that basically is in the past. Everybody's, as he said, everybody's basically on the same page. He went on to say, it's been fun. Everybody's been welcoming from all the staff to the players. And then he transitioned to just himself. I've got something to prove every year. He knew that the last few years for the start of his NFL career have not been the best, that he definitely has some things to prove. And especially when you're a player at his age, let's remember this, he's still only 25.
He's a young player. And
when you're signed to a 1-year deal, you know what that means.
Prove it.
So for him at this stage, and still in a great position for his prime years to continue in the NFL, he knows exactly what those contract numbers meant. And he went on to talk about the appeal of Jim Harbaugh and, did that end up affecting his free agency decision? And obviously he said with a resounding yes, because he's won everywhere that he's been. He said, if that doesn't stand out to you as a player, then I don't know what will. And then what I really liked from this one, Dan, and whether this is coming from Harbaugh, from Jesse Minter, from Clinkscale, however it is, he was asked on just the early impressions of the team in general. And what I like this is what he said. It's a different mindset when you can play with your instincts and your game. In general, that was an interesting quote to me. I don't know how the situation ended up running in Tennessee, but if it gives you a little bit of an indicator to think about how they're going to deploy this secondary unit more specifically, this goes back to the quotes of Clinkscale.
Exactly.
Putting them in the positions to where they're going to succeed, doing the things that they do best.
Yeah, I mean, Christian Fulton talked about, wanting to and getting back to just playing free. And, something to remember, though, is you allow players to play with instincts if they have good instincts. There are some players who don't have good instincts, and that has to be coached up. But with players, and when you say instincts, right? Chris Leary talked about Alohi Gilman in the instincts. And I will always remember we had Alohi Gilman on the show a couple years ago, and I think it was right after he made that 4th down stop where he jumped over the entire line to hold on to someone on a 4th and 1 or 4th and short run. And Alohi jumped over the entire line, grabbed the, I think it was the running back, held him for loss of down. Those are instincts. Derwin James, insane instincts, right? You look at Asante Samuel Jr., the guy is very instinctive. His click and close is insane. Junior Colson, same thing. You look at, obviously, the 2 defensive ends, Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa, Thule. Like, these all these players predicate. That's what their game is based on, is just the feel and the flow and the instincts of an individual play. But sometimes instincts can get the best of you. But it seems like for Christian Fulton specifically, he felt handcuffed. And these are my words, not his. He didn't say handcuffed, but he said he didn't get to choose who he was drafted by. And it seems like he was very eager to no longer be in Tennessee and is very eager for a new start with a scheme that seems to, and a coaching staff that seems to fit what he's looking for. Remember, he chose the Chargers. This is the first time he got to choose where he went, given his history, and he chose the Chargers. And a fun one, he chose number 7. Talked about the reason why he chose it was a new, fresh start. And then an ode to the LSU days and some of the greats, Grant Delpit, DJ Chark, now fellow teammate, Derek Stingley, and the Honey Badger himself, Tyrann Mathieu. All of them were number 7. So an ode to them. I'm excited for Christian Fulton. It's a wild card roster spot. Christian Fulton, if he could be the guy he was 3 years ago, like, woo! But the last 2 years, that's why the Chargers brought him and a lot of these guys in. This is kind of like a buy low, sell high, or buy low, play high, hopefully.
Yeah, it's definitely looked at it, and I've used the term reclamation project in mentioning Christian Fulton previously, and I hope that that's what it turns into.
Yes, yeah.
Remember, Dan, when he came to the Chargers, as you mentioned, he chose the Chargers. He was getting offered more money from other teams. And he was courted by the Bengals, and there was one other team that was in there, but he ended up taking less money to come to the Chargers. And I think what more of the context in general as it relates to the coaching staff in general, as Fulton was mentioning here, he said, quote, I like how they break down the details and how they want everyone to learn everything as far as the defense. Sounds pretty familiar as far as what Clinkscale was saying in terms of having his DBs be versatile. Went on to say, quote, I feel like that's getting everybody comfortable with their role and really just being comfortable with the guy that's next to you is doing. I feel like that's a great way to go about it, because if you're comfortable with the guy and he's comfortable with what he's doing, you're going to be comfortable and knowing what you're doing, how to use your help, just small things like that. I feel like that is really big. And I liked that perspective, Dan, because we've seen over a number of different years, whether you're talking about any of the previous, coaching regimes, whether it be the Lynn era, the McCoy era, the Staley era. The Chargers have had DBs in the past that routinely have gotten cooked. And if you're an opposing corner, watching that from that perspective, in your mind, you're probably thinking, okay, I need to do more just instinctively. Like, what's going to happen?
I gotta help the guy out, man.
Your brain is over here. But as Fulton's going on and saying this, if you're in a position now where you can trust someone to do their job, you can be comfortable enough to handle the things that you can handle, and that's going to overall bring up everybody else's play. So he came in with some hot takes, had a little bit to get off his chest, but overall, it seems like there were a lot of things that made him attractive to come to the Chargers.
Yeah, and that last piece you mentioned just screams the challenges that Derwin James was facing last year. Looking at that DB room, right, and watching those DBs on any given Sunday, Derwin's trying to be everywhere on the field, and then seeing Michael Davis get cooked, and seeing Asante Samuel Jr. get cooked, and seeing these broken tackles galore, and him trying to maybe do more because he's trying to pick up the pieces that people are dropping. Like, that's just unfortunate, and it sucks to see. And I gotta believe that there's at least part of that as to the reason why Derwin was just kind of, it seemed like, and this isn't a slight to Derwin James, but just seemed overwhelmed by all of the things that were put on his plate. And like, sometimes you want to go to a buffet, right? You want to eat all the food, but like, sometimes that's not healthy. And it's good to have like just a couple portions that you can focus on. Derwin James can eat, but like, give him a sandbox to play in, right? Like, give him the tools to succeed, and he's going to flourish. That's what has me bullish on the secondary. Again, so many questions. Like, I have no clue. This sounds fantastic, and it sounds promising. I still have concerns about the depth of this group, but the teaching and the coaching and the fundamentals and the scheme, I don't have questions about that stuff. I fully believe they can coach up these players. Do I wish they can coach up a couple others that they bring in for depth? Absolutely. But promising discussions from these players and these coaches on this day.
Yeah, definitely. It gets me amped up, especially for a room that has so many questions, like you said, Dan. Where is the weight going to be distributed on a certain player's shoulders for this? Even if there is more competition that's being brought into this room in the next few months, which I still believe that there will be, just following the bouncing ball from what Joe Ortiz has said, they will never stop looking for corners in any situation if it betters the football team. But this cornerback room in general has had so much turnover in the last 2 years. And now you're talking about new positional coaches, a new defensive coordinator, and a new system overall that has a new philosophy on how they're going to improve the play of every single individual that's on that field. I'm excited to see the results of this.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember context and perspective and to appreciate the journey and the transformation of this group, because let's not get it twisted. The only remaining pieces of this cornerback room are Asante Samuel Jr., Dean Leonard, and Jazir Taylor. And if we're being real, do you trust any of those three to be your lockdown, shutdown corners? You add Christian Fulton, who had a tumultuous last few years, Cam Hart, Tarheeb Still, both rookies. Who are you actually trusting versus who are you just hoping that are going to play out? That's where I think this team needs to bring in someone that you can trust, and there's a history of proven success. But the journey is exciting. Like, this is day one. This is day one of a long journey for this group to improve. Jake, anything else? I know we're pumped, excited for the schedule release. Tomorrow we'll be live at 5. So if you guys are online, join in. We'll do some instant reactions and takeaways. We'll see how many primetime games. Jake, over under 3.5 primetime games for this Chargers team. You're going over. Okay.
Look at the head coach, my man.
But look at the 5 wins. That's the only reason why. The only reason why I'm saying it might be under is because the team.
Look, I get it, and the Chargers are tied for.
They had 5 last year, right?
They're tied for 3rd or 4th lowest strength of schedule coming into this season. But the Harbaugh appeal is too much. You already know that the Chargers at some point are going to play the Ravens this year. That's already one game that's going to be in prime time. The Harbaugh Bowl. You're going to bring that back. Probably. You know you're going to put the Chiefs back. So there's no question that this is going over 3.5.
All right. Anything else before we get out of here?
Bring on the schedule, baby. Let's have some fun.
Let's have some fun.
Why am I forgetting who it was that said it this morning? As Kyle Brandt said this morning, all you opposing social media teams that don't have a lightning bolt on your helmet, you need to come for the Chargers, because right now the Chargers social media team is better than you at the schedule releases. So they have killed it with the anime the last couple of years. I don't think that they're going to do a triple dip into that this year. I'd be very surprised if they did. But whatever new...
Can't wait.
Yeah, whatever new stuff decides to come out, whatever's got someone cooking in their brain trust for what they're going to put out tomorrow, I'm excited about it.
Yeah, I'm pumped. I'm ready. That'll do it for Jake, myself, Chargers Unleashed, and LAFB Network. Thank you guys and gals so much for tuning in. Enjoy schedule release tomorrow. Hope to see you there live, and we'll talk to you on the next Chargers Unleashed.